Right, so we're looking at Matthew chapter 4, 12 to 23, and we are at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's just come out of the desert, and he picks up the baton from John the Baptist, preaching repentance, healing, and calling his first disciples. And I think, if I think about the challenge of this passage, I think this passage challenges any passive or spectator version of faith. So Jesus doesn't invite the fishermen to admire him from a distance or to, applaud from the sidelines or from the boat. He calls them to leave their nets, their family businesses, their familiar routines and securities, and to follow him in a life of mission. And I'm always astonished by their response, which is immediate and concrete. They reorientate their entire lives and priorities around Jesus, not the other way around. And for me, the uncomfortable question bites. Where has faith become mostly watching, commenting, and preserving the familiar rather than actually changing how time, money, gifts, and relationships are used because Jesus has called? A very biting question, I think.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, my eyes fell on the immediately they left the boat, as you were saying. And so I was thinking, when do we ever do something immediately? We have to weigh up the pros and cons, and we have to work out if this is actually the appropriate thing to be doing, or if there might be a better one to be doing. And, we have all these hoops we have to jump through, red tape we have to fill out. It's just fascinating, the idea of, because Jesus is called, we just do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny that Matthew uses that word because, of course, Mark uses it, I've forgotten how many times. And I haven't actually gone through this, but it's usually the action of God and, the direct result of the encounter of God. And I think Matthew is always very aware of Mark, and he wants to make something, I think, a very important point here about the urgency of the encounter with God. It does change our lives, and it does put aside those action plans, and it does put aside the massive draft we've done of where our life is going to lead us. And as I said at another time, it's kind of inconvenient sometimes. They probably wanted to check with their accountants first whether it was safe, but they didn't. The gospel is urgent.
I like the idea that we should orientate ourselves to Jesus, and how often perhaps we expect it that Jesus should orientate himself around us.
Right.
He should fit in. I don't think Jesus ever fits in. He demands absolute attention. Yeah. Shall I carry on? So, good news. I think another obvious point is that Jesus begins his ministry not in the temple, not with the religiously powerful or impressive, but in a mixed, marginal, somewhat looked down upon community. And the first to be called are not the religious, but the ordinary working people with no special qualifications, except that Jesus looks at them, calls them, and promises to make something new of their lives. So the good news is that the kingdom of heaven comes into overlooked places and ordinary lives. That's us, bringing light and purpose and healing. And nothing is too small, too late, or too obscure to be gathered into God's, Christ's world. Yes? Wow. What's your good news?
But they're all kind of marginal people, aren't they?
Yeah.
Jesus, and from a marginal place. I mean, this is... back, the black stump is a fair way away. But I was thinking about just trying to think about these guys responding to the call, a question from before, I suppose, and it can't have been in a vacuum. I mean, they've got a religious history. All these guys, they've all been to the synagogue and learned the Torah off by heart, as little boys did, and maybe they've been the bright ones that the rabbis have taken aside and given extra instruction to, or whatever. And they're of a religious disposition or a spiritual disposition or a questioning disposition, whichever way you want to. But Jesus, he calls them, and it's not, they've got this context that they're in, and we would tend, when we call people to Christian work, is we look at our organization and say, well, it needs shoring up here, you can go and do that, or it needs somebody to do this, and you can go and do that. So he's not calling them to strengthen the synagogue or take a more active part in the Bible lessons or something like that. But he's calling them to something completely new, and so new that none of them knew what on earth was going on, and perhaps really Jesus didn't know in detail what was going to happen to them. And that's a challenge too. This conflict, which I feel constantly between the call of the organization and the call of God, which are not necessarily the same thing.
Absolutely. R.S. Thomas, the poet, talks about a fast God leading us constantly out of that safety zone. And you were talking a moment ago about the margins, and I, funnily enough, looked at the book that I've looked at for this, and I hope you can see that.
Matthew.
But it's Matthew and the margins, and he constantly taking us back to this fact that Jesus isn't going to leave us in those really cozy places. I think we need to be reminded of that, especially in the great monolithic churches that we've all had encounters with. Kind of breaks the shibboleths and sends us out into the dangerous places. We're not dangerous necessarily in a nuclear or a military sense, but dangerous in that this is the unknown. I wasn't expecting this, But the footsteps, as R.S. Thomas would say, are still warm.
Yeah. I'm going to go into my so what now.
Can I just do good news?
Yeah, do good news. Absolutely.
And that's because this starts up in verse 12, doesn't it? It's reading, yeah. So it's got that whole fulfillment prophecy. And the reason I think that is good news is that the context of that back in Isaiah is that these countries are about to be stripped of the people. This is the first of the takings out and of the people of the northern tribes. So Israel, and they kind of just disappeared at that time. So the promise of this is that even though this was complete desolation at this time, the light is going to come, and this is going to be a scene of something new and amazing. And now it's actually happening. So the promise of God is being fulfilled an awfully long time later, but it's still somehow beautiful. Within this place of desolation, new life and Jesus's work is beginning. So yeah, just a thing of hope.
Yeah.
It must have been incredulous at the time, to actually think that something that had been prophesied so long ago, that people were actually seeing it happen. It must have been mesmerizing. Sorry, Kelvin, I interrupted you.
No, I was just thinking the call of these guys, and we have the privilege, which they didn't have, of knowing how it works out for them.
Yes.
We know their history, and actually, I think they all come to pretty sticky ends. So what they're being called to is suffering and eventually death. But saying that, you look at the lives they led and traveling all over the world, but what to them was the world, and furthering the kingdom of God, and it must have been profoundly rewarding and energizing and wonderful, the life that they were being called to. And the alternative, which would have been pretty good too, was a little house on the beach with the missus and the little mockapuna running around, and a nice comfy boat and an easy retirement, and countless thousands of others who had that life, but we know nothing about them. And but here's these guys called to both immense suffering and immense reward, and the two of those I don't think could be easily separated.
Yeah. So let me go into the so what. So I think that the central part of this reading is follow me, and I'm hoping one of you theologians is going to tell me what the Greek was, because what did it exactly mean? Like get it, does it mean get in behind, or is it just come on, let's just go? But it's central, and it's something that Christ says to all of us. And so I think there is value when we're looking at this. If I was preaching on this, I would be asking, let's hear that again, that Christ is saying to us today, follow me. And then praying, Lord, what does following you look like now? You know, we might have made a commitment in our 20s or 30s, but now, what does it look like for me to follow you at my age and health and circumstances? And then expecting a specific nudge towards a person, a habit, a ministry of prayer, or an encouragement of hospitality. What is it going to look like? And the other thing I'd say is that when he calls the fishermen, he says, I will make you fishers of men. So he's using their existing skills for something quite different. And they're very ordinary skills, you know, they're just fishing skills. And I think that when Jesus calls us, he doesn't change our identity. He uses the skills we have in a new way. And so what might that be for you? You know, you might have the skill of knitting or crocheting, you know, and maybe the call is to make baby hats for newborns at the hospital, or maybe it's writing letters or emails of encouragement. And may I say to anybody out there that your priests need you to write them emails of encouragement, you know, or it might be praying systematically or quietly befriending people on the margins. What is it that you have, that simple, ordinary skill that Christ is inviting you to use as you follow him? So that was my so what.
I think you've done it again, Lisa. I honestly don't think we need to so what any more than that. Thank you. Yeah. And that's the last of these more casual, less prepared conversations. And by the time whoever's watches this, there will be back to the normal routine, hopefully appearing next week. It's been fun. Thanks, you three.
Thank you.